Well, let's talk about the legal fallout from the chaos on Capitol Hill, legal liability. We're joined by defense attorney, former federal prosecutor Shan. Shan, good to have you on this morning. First, let's begin with the president, his children, his son, his lawyer, Rudy Giuliani. They were there on January 6th. They encouraged that mob to go to the Capitol, some in stronger terms than others. I mean, you had trial by combat, I think was what Giuliani used. But what is the legal standard to charge, say, the president for encouraging the mob? What would a prosecutor like yourself, what test would you have to meet?
You'd have to look at the specific language. I think that although Trump certainly had the intent to have them march, I think he would have a legal defense as to whether he was encouraging them to do violence or not. Giuliani's on much weaker ground. I mean, using the word combat in that circumstance, I think, is going to be problematic for him. I think prosecutors are conservative. They have to prove beyond reasonable doubt, so they're going to look at that very cautiously before they use the incite to riot charge.
I mean, looking at the article of impeachment that we just got during the show, they quote the president as saying, if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore. I suppose they could say fight. Do they mean with their words versus physically? But still, I mean, it's not the direct word combat, but it's still quite a statement from the president. On the legal front of impeaching him again, do we know constitutionally, can they impeach the president after he leaves office, or does the process at least need to begin, as it seems to be this week, before he's out?
I think it needs to begin. I mean, there's some discussion about this, whether they could continue it afterwards. I don't think there's anything that stops them from continuing that. And obviously the point of that would be not so much to remove him from office since he'd be out, but rather to ban him from taking any kind of federal office again. So I think that can be done. I think they do need to commence it before he goes, although arguably you could do it afterwards. I think starting it, the House doing the article of impeachment is very easy. That's like the charging document. It's getting the Senate trial done that quickly that will be a challenge.
Shan, there was already speculation, actually we should call it expectation, that the president might pardon himself prior to all this, just to protect himself for any legal liability for anything, or attempt to. Now becomes even more of a potential concern here. Tell our viewers whether that would hold water, in particular for something like this, incitement to riot.
I think it's not a question of just how awful the crime is that he's pardoning himself for. I think it's just a question of whether the Justice Department under Biden is going to let that stand or not. It's a speculative, theoretical constitutional question of whether he can do it or not. It's not specifically in the Constitution. But if he does do that, whether himself or stepping aside, having Pence do it, I think it basically is an invitation to the department to challenge that question, because frankly, no self-respecting prosecutor is going to let that stand, that you're letting the criminal themselves pardon themselves. So I think if he does that, it's an invitation to go ahead and prosecute and fight it.
Interesting.
Explain to us why you are worried about and think people should pay particular attention to a potential mass pardon of those who led that insurrection on Capitol Hill, even killing Capitol Police Officer Brian Sicknick. Is a mass pardon for everyone who ascended on the Capitol that day legal?
It is legal as to the federal pardon, and the reason I'm worried about that is his obvious message to them of, quote, we love you, etc. They didn't even fly the flag at half-mast for the officer who died defending the Capitol. I think the important part is we're seeing a national investigation going on by necessity to support the federal charges. I think it's really important that they follow up on that with actual state charges as well, because those state charges can't be pardoned by Trump.
That's right. Okay, Shan, thank you very much for being here and helping us understand what is just such uncharted territory. House Democrats threatening